Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Unja Bihari Radha Madhava Unja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Unja Bihari Radha Madhava Unja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Nana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Unja Bihari Radha Madhava Unja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Lalita Vishaka Jaya Radesha Lalita Vishaka Jaya Radesha Amrita Vishaka Jaya Radesha Amrita Vishaka Jaya Radesha Jaya Gora Nitai Jaya Gora Nitai Jaya Gora Nitai Jaya Gora Nitai Gora Nitai Gora Nitai Gora Nitai Jaya Gora Nitai Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Nitai Gaura Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo Nitai Gaura Haribo Haribo Nitai Gaura Haribo Jayam Vishnu Parpanamhamsa Parivajagacharya Stotaratatashinamanga Sabhaicharanavindna Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jayam Vishnu Parpanamhamsa Parivajagacharya Stotaratatashinamanga Sabhaicharanavindna I'm sorry, Bhakti Siddhanta Sati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Samaveda Bhaktivinda Ki Nitai Gaur Pemanande all glorious assembled devotees, all glorious assembled devotees, all glorious assembled devotees, all glorious Shishi Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. I'd like to beg the blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis so that we can have a nice discussion today on this glorious Bhagavad Gita. We're approaching the end of this Bhagavad Gita, nearly the midpoint of this final chapter. We'll be reading today chapter 18, text number 36, from the chapter entitled The Perfection of Renunciation. Sukham idānīṁ tri-vidham śṛṇu me bharatarṣabha abhyāsād ramate duḥkhāntaṁ ca nigacchati sukham idānīṁ tri-vidham śṛṇu me bharatarṣabha abhyāsād ramate yatra duḥkāntaṁ ca nigacchati sukham idānīṁ tri-vidham śṛṇu me bharatar-ṛṣabha abhyāsād ramate yatra duḥkāntaṁ ca nigacchati sukham idānīṁ tri-vidham śṛṇu me bharatar-ṛṣabha abhyāsāt ramate yatra duḥkāntaṁ ca nigacchati sukham idānīṁ tri-vidham śṛṇu me bharatarṣabha abhyāsāt ramate yatra duḥkāntaṁ nigacchati sukham idānīṁ tri-vidham śṛṇu me bharatarṣabha abhyāsāt ramate yatra duḥkāntaṁ Vaishnavis. śṛṇu me bharata-ṛṣabha. Sukham, happiness. 2. But, idānīṁ, now. Tri-vidhaṁ, of 3 kinds. śṛṇu, hear. Me, from me. Bharatar-ṛṣabha, O best of the Bharatas. Abhyāsād, by practice. Ramate, one enjoys. Yatra, where. Duḥkha, of distress. Antam, the end. Cha, also. Nigacchati, gains. O best of the Bharatas, now please hear from me about the 3 kinds of happiness by which the conditioned soul enjoys and by which he comes to the end of all distress. Please repeat. O best of the Bharatas, now please hear from me about the 3 kinds of happiness by which the conditioned soul enjoys and by which he sometimes comes to the end of all distress. Purport, by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. A conditioned soul tries to enjoy material happiness again and again. Thus he chews the chewed. But sometimes in the course of such enjoyment, he becomes relieved from material entanglement by association with the Great Soul. In other words, a conditioned soul is always engaged in some type of sense gratification. But when he understands by good association that it is only a repetition of the same thing, and he is awakened to his real Kṛṣṇa consciousness, he is sometimes relieved from such repetitive so-called happiness. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamstra Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Krupa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So again, I'll just repeat the verse that we read, verse 36 from chapter 18, the perfection of renunciation. O best of the Bharatas, now please hear from me about the 3 kinds of happiness by which the conditioned soul enjoys and by which he sometimes comes to the end of all distress. How many of us want to come to the end of all distress? Right? That is our goal in life. Actually, this Bhagavad Gita, it is the supreme wisdom by which we can permanently end all distress. And this Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is speaking, contains extraordinarily practical solutions that we can apply into our day-to-day life that can truly bring an end to all distress. And actually it is the only means. You know, we recently celebrated Gita Jayanti, just 2 days back, the glorious day in which this was spoken, as we know from chapters 4, re-spoken. It isn't the original Advent, but when Krishna spoke on the battlefield. And the Bhagavad Gita in that day when we were reciting verses, it reminds me that our knowledge of Bhagavad Gita is not measured by the number of verses we have memorized. It is measured by the number of verses that have changed my action in life day to day. To the extent I take these instructions in the Bhagavad Gita and apply some transformative changes to my behaviors, then I have actually beginning to understand the Bhagavad Gita. And that is the very practical nature of these set of instructions. So here we're hearing about 3 kinds of happiness. It's quite appropriate in the Western world. What is today? Christmas. And we say, Merry Christmas. Everybody wants to be merry and happy. And we get some clue into this that, in our calendar, all of the holidays, they're all centered around spiritual basis. This is the appearance of Jesus Christ, who Srila Prabhupada deemed was, a great devotee. And that's why we call it holiday, or holy day. And it gives us some insight into our, path for happiness. It is only found through the process of devotional service. So we'll talk a little bit today about this concept that Krishna is speaking to, that which sometimes comes to the end of all distress. How does that sometimes happen? And how can we make it assured for all of us? So this 36th verse, it comes in this section between verses 19 and 40, in which Krishna is explaining the 3 modes of material nature. So he's repeating or summarizing what he spoke in chapters 13 through 17. And he's explaining how different things like knowledge, action, the performer, intelligence, determination, these 5, and now this is the 6th, which is happiness. How each of those are exhibited in the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So we are nearing the end of this section. So the next 3 verses, Krishna is going to explain about the modes of the happiness in the mode of goodness, happiness in the mode of passion, and in ignorance. And like this, Srila Prabhupada, instructs us that we can assess where are we within these modes and bring ourselves to the mode of goodness, from which we can then transcend to the mode of pure goodness. Because we know coming just to the mode of goodness is not sufficient. And Prabhupada used to always give the example, I think I mentioned this last time I spoke, which is, it's like an airplane. When an airplane comes to the runway, the purpose of approaching the runway is not to stay on the runway. It is to use that runway to then ascend into the air. So similarly, coming from the modes of ignorance and passion, it is good to come to the mode of goodness. But from there, we must transcend. And that happens only through devotional service. And sometimes we confuse mode of goodness with bhakti. But remember, the modes of material nature. Bhakti is on the spiritual realm. So our goal here is to understand these modes, bring ourselves to the mode of goodness, and then come to the point of spiritual advancement in devotional service. Of course, all of you here are all practicing devotional service, and so the relevance of the modes of material nature comes in the form of, often in the practice of our bhakti, until we come to the true pure platform, these modes creep into our devotional service. Sometimes the mode of passion creeps into our service. Sometimes even the mode of ignorance or even goodness. And so by understanding these modes, even though we are, aspiring sadhakas, it has great relevance. Okay? So this happiness, we're all searching for happiness. It is the uniting factor of all living entities. Anybody woke up today wanting to be unhappy? No. Right? We wake up every day with the same goal. And so does everybody else. Everybody has the same goal. The theist, the atheist, the agnostics, the humans, the birds, the beasts, the plant, everyone. Everybody has this single goal in life, which is to find happiness. And of course we know that is because the soul is made up of ananda. And so that is the natural instinct of every living entity, which is to be happy. And so we can see that with so much effort put forth, why are we not finding happiness? Recently a survey was done. 190 countries were covered. And it concluded that humanity has never been more unhappy than today. Not like literally today, but in this current time. And we sort of wonder, because there's been so much advancement in all kinds of technologies and things like that. You would think even coming out of the COVID downturn, right, having the relative experience of COVID, now people would be happy and relieved to be back doing their activities. But still, there is just an ocean of unhappiness. And that is because they, as Prabhupada wrote in this purport, we continue to chew the chewed. And how often? Repetitively. Over and over and over again. So this Bhagavad Gita, it is truly the formula, the recipe for transcending these modes. And as Krishna says in this, come to the end of all distress and find real happiness. Right? So just to quickly summarize, because we'll get into it more detail in the coming days, but this happiness, Krishna is saying that there are three kinds of happiness. So in the mode of goodness, we see happiness. It is a little bitter in the beginning, but it ends in happiness. It is like this. There is some austerity. Happiness in the mode of goodness begins with the process of self-realization. And so there's a little bit of austerity, maybe some sense control, maybe detaching from some things we like to take to the process of spiritual life. Right? So that is the process. And we see this in Nectar of Instruction. Right? Anybody remember what example Rupa Goswami gives us in the Nectar of Instruction? Bitter in the beginning, sweet in the end. Jaundice. Yes. He says that just as a jaundiced person, when someone with jaundice eats something sweet, how does it taste? Bitter. But is it bitter? No. And when somebody eats something bitter, afflicted by jaundice, how does that taste? Sweet. So what is our jaundice, Rupa Goswami is saying? It is our avidya, our ignorance, our forgetfulness of who we are, which is we are eternal servant of the Lord. We are part and parcel of Krishna. So when we become conditioned by the material modes, conditioned meaning we become subjected to the modes, we forget Krishna. And we begin to act on the platform in the body. And so in that state, what is actually sweet, spiritual life, it tastes bitter. And what is actually bitter, material sense enjoyment, it tastes sweet. The Rupa Goswami guides that the doctor, to cure the jaundiced person, what does he give? He gives some sugar cubes. So he keeps eating sugar cubes. Yes, it tastes bitter. But soon, that patient will become cured of their jaundice. And that which is sweet will soon actually taste sweet. And that which is bitter will again feel bitter. So this is the devotee's progress as they purify. Yes, initially there's a little bit of bitterness. Getting up early in the morning, attending Mangalarti, chanting our rounds attentively, reading Srila Prabhupada's books. Maybe there's a little bit of austerity, a little bit of initiative. Maybe we're tempted, I just want to sleep in today. Oh, ding, 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 mode of ignorance. Or maybe I really want to go and watch some movie or watch this. Maybe it's mode of passion, right? Or maybe I should go so I can get some good luck on my promotion next week. Maybe that's mode of good, right? So these are different modes that kind of tinge into our practice of bhakti. But this avidya, this ignorance, is only cured by continuing to take to this process. So to continue to practice, as we see repeatedly, one can progress. So this is in the mode of goodness. In the mode of passion, the happiness is sweet in the beginning and ends in bitterness. And Srila Prabhupada always gives the example of sex life. It is pleasurable momentarily, but then ends with so many other complications and challenges. Intoxication has that same nature. Maybe a few moments of enjoyment and then suffering. So this is happiness in the mode of passion. Starts out sweet and ends bitter. And then mode of ignorance. It's miserable from the beginning, middle, and end. One is in full delusion. This sleep, intoxicate, heavy laziness. And this is happiness in the mode of ignorance. And actually there is no real happiness, right? So, to find happiness, we need knowledge. Right? We need knowledge. We acquire knowledge about how to find happiness even in the material world. I want to go watch some movie. I acquire some knowledge about which is a good one and which is a bad one. I want to go eat some foodstuffs. I acquire knowledge which will be tasty to me, which will be enjoyable for me, which will not. So knowledge leads to our pursuit of happiness. So material knowledge, all the knowledge we acquire in our studies, in our pursuit academically, it is in a platform of the body, material. So material knowledge can only get us material happiness. But spiritual knowledge can get us spiritual happiness. And so of course that brings one to understand, as Rupa Goswami explains in Nectar Devotion, what is the difference between spiritual happiness and material happiness? So he explains this mundane rasa, right? This taste for material enjoyment. It is very limited and temporary. But the happiness from spiritual life, it is unlimited and eternal. One is compared to, if you take all the happiness in the world, it would amount to the amount of water that can be held within the hoof print of a calf. Not even a cow, a calf. Whatever indentation a calf can make and whatever water can accumulate in that in a rainy season, that much is the happiness that being gained from the entire material creation. And what is the happiness in spiritual life? It is a sindhu, is an ocean of nectar, amrita. It's bhakti rasamrita, sindhu. It is an ocean, unending ocean of happiness. So the choice we have every day is, am I going to pursue my material knowledge to pursue material happiness, or my spiritual knowledge to pursue spiritual happiness? But we understand one thing, that this happiness, this ananda, it only comes from the platform of the soul. One can get very limited happiness from the material body. I gave this example recently, and I'll use it again. See, we have to acknowledge one thing that at first is a little ego-shattering, which is good for us, which is, we were made to be enjoyed by Krishna. That's it. We were made to be enjoyed by Krishna. If I try to work in any other realm, it won't work. I'll give you an example. This is an example I used previously. A bicycle. A bicycle is made to get somebody from point A to point B more efficiently than walking on my own two legs. Right? That's the purpose of a bicycle. Now, if I try to use a bicycle to sleep at night, will it be effective? I might get, but it's not going to be ultimately satisfying, because that's not what it was made for. It was not designed to give me a place to sleep. Well, I was not made to enjoy the material world. I was made to be enjoyed by Krishna. So the only way to find our real happiness is to be in loving service with the Supreme Lord. That is the only way. Yes, you'll find glimmers and glimpses of enjoyment in this material world, inasmuch as you could probably take a 5-minute nap on a bicycle, but it's not really going to satisfy your ultimate needs and cravings. And this is how the whole material world is created. And thus we go on over and over and over again, as Srila Prabhupada, right? Chewing the chewed. Right? What is that? Anybody remember where that comes from? Prahlad Maharaj, yes. The second time Prahlad Maharaj was, asked by his father, Hiranyakashipu. The first time, Hiranyakashipu, Prahlad Maharaj said, "Oh, best of the demons, take to devotional service." He became angry, sent him back to Sandanamarka to study. After they really trained him up good, he came back and he's, got him on his lap, he's petting him, and okay, now what have you learned best? And he basically said, "All you material sense enjoyers are leading your way to hell, chewing the chewed." So he gives this very stark but accurate explanation of what the gross materialist is doing. It is a pathway ultimately to hell, because one continues to forget their relationship with the Supreme Lord and thus engage in various sinful activities. And that's why Srila Prabhupada tells us that even coming to the mode of goodness is dangerous, because eventually you'll be tempted by the lower modes. And yes, you may be acting righteously and piously for some period of time, but eventually the greed and the lust for material sense enjoyment will overcome your intelligence and you will fall down into some of the sinful life. And so this is the opportunity we have to avoid that. So Krishna gives us this very wonderful formula in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, right? So how to start? We said this is bitter, right? Who wants to take some bitter medicine? Nobody wants to take some bitter medicine, but they will if they get some relatively quick response. If the doctor says, "Hey, you take this bitter medicine for the next 20 years and then you'll get cured." Anybody's ready to go see that doctor? No. We want instant results. And this is the beauty of Krishna consciousness and what Krishna has given. He's given us this perfect formula. He says, "Param drisva nivartate," that just by experiencing the higher taste of bhakti, one can progressively increase their spiritual activities. So Krishna gives us this response. When we just start to practice spiritual life in small ways, He reciprocates, He answers to those. Yes, we may be 95% absorbed in material life, but that 5% we are dedicated to Krishna also generates some response, this higher taste. And that's what propels one further and further into spiritual life. And that's what we use in preaching, right? When we go out and we spread this message of Bhagavad Gita, we cannot often tell people, give up all these nonsensical activities and you're going to, burn in hell. No, we have to give it in. Just chant one round a day. Give Krishna 7 minutes and you take the other 23 hours and 53 minutes and just chant one day and try it for 90 days every day. We try to just get them started in the process. And when that process starts, we know what happens. Oh, I'm getting some benefit. I'm getting some benefit. If you are preaching to folks and you're trying to get them to start, one thing that I found effective, I tell them, okay, write down today's date. And then write down a date 90 days from now. And you write down 3 to 4 things you would like to improve about your life, improve about yourself. You put it in an envelope, you seal it, and you put it in a drawer. And then you can put a reminder on your phone to open it 90 days from now. But between now and those 90 days, you commit to chanting 1 round of japa every day, the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning. Just 7 minutes. And then you determine whether some progress was made. And it's their own experiment. And it really works. Because people find that, yes, I'm actually becoming less angry. I'm becoming less agitated. My mind is more at peace. Whatever the things that they're struggling with, they find some tangible response. And that's why Krishna calls us, right? Rajavidya, Rajagoyam. And he says, Pratiksha Vagamam. That it's perceptible. This is not theoretical practice. The happiness of spiritual life is very tangible. And that's the wonderful formula that Krishna gives us in this process. And we see in the progressions of devotional service, as we go further and further into acknowledging and understanding, I was only made to be served by the Lord, to be used by the Lord, to serve Him. That the more and more we surrender to that principle, actually the more we enjoy. It's the ultimate irony of the way the material world works. The more we try to enjoy ourselves, the more we suffer. And the more we just dedicate ourselves to serving Krishna's senses as Rishikesha, actually the more we enjoy. And Rupa Goswami again explains in Nectar of Devotion that as one progresses from sadhana bhakti to bhava bhakti to prema bhakti, this feature of happiness in the first level of sadhana bhakti, there's this subhaddha, which one experiences this relief from their material sufferings. And subhaddha, this happiness. So the kleshagni burns to all our material suffering. We get some tangible effect. When one comes to the point of bhava bhakti, the experience of spiritual life is so overwhelming that even liberation seems insignificant. Liberation is not insignificant, but from the platform of how sweet pure devotional service is, it seems insignificant. The example we always give, if you're walking down the street in New York City, they have really tall skyscrapers. Srila Prabhupada was fond of talking about the skyscrapers. So from the ground level, those skyscrapers look huge, gigantic. But on your flight home, as you fly over the city, how do those skyscrapers look? Very small. Right? So it's a matter of perspective. So the point is, liberation is very significant. But from the perspective of pure devotional service and bhava bhakti, it doesn't even register. It's completely insignificant. That's how much happiness one achieves when they're fully surrendered to this principle of why we were here. And of course, when one reaches to the point of prema bhakti, this sandhanana visheshatma, what that means? That the happiness is so dense, it's so condensed, that actually nothing else can even enter. Just like if I have a syringe and I try to inject some fluid into a ripe mango, can I do so? Well, I can just put it in, right? It's ripe, nice and soft. If I have a syringe and I try to inject something into a stone, can I? No. Because that stone is so densely packed. There's no space. It's full. Like that, the happiness one gets as they progress, it's so overwhelming that one doesn't even have to control their senses. There's no attraction. The attraction is such a higher platform, and it's so complete and fulfilling that one isn't even looking for anything else. So this is the nature of spiritual success. And what's the best we can do in material life, in the material world? I live in the U.S., so I hope this example carries some weight. But in the U.S., in other parts of the world, we have these things called amusement parks. Amusement parks, to me, they're like a synopsis of the whole material world. What's an amusement park? You go to the park to do what? What's the main goal you go to the park for? To ride some rides. Right? You go on different rides, Ferris wheels, some roller coaster. So you're there, let's say 12 hours. From 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 95+% of your time is done what? Waiting in lines. You wait in line 30, 40, 50 minutes for 35, 40 seconds, maybe a minute of a ride. And then you do it all over again. Isn't this our material life? We work like dogs, day in and day out, year after year after year, for just a little bit of enjoyment, 1 or 2 weeks holiday. Maybe I'll work my whole life and save up some money so that when I'm old, I can then retire and then worry about how I'm going to support myself. This is the material life. So this is, the amusement park to me is a great example of that opportunity. So this happiness that Krishna is speaking about, of course, we are transcending these modes and coming to the point of devotional service. And so Prabhupada writes in the Purport how to come about from this. how to come out from this material engagement. And he says, it is by good association. So it's by association that one can overcome the modes of material nature. And that is what Srila Prabhupada proved to us, right? He was preaching to those who were fully immersed in sense enjoyment. And he was able to attract them to the spiritual life. They were fully engaged in sense enjoyment, and he was able to attract them to a very austere and surrendered form of life. Why? Because of the taste of devotional service and the purity of his association. He was so charismatic and so powerful his association was. He could just chant under a tree in a park, and hundreds would gather around him to hear the holy names emanating from his mouth. And their lives would transform. People speak of, they just heard the ching, 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 ching of the kartals, and they were like drawn to it magnetically. This is the power of association. And Srila Prabhupada's association, it lives on strong today. How? Through his books. These books are gigantic magnets. No matter how conditioned one might be, no matter how materially attached one might be, just giving this Bhagavad Gita to somebody, it will work. They are ticking time bombs. So powerful is the message. Srila Prabhupada's association is personally present through his books. And so if we go out and distribute these books, again in a Western culture, this is the gift-giving season. What better gift we can give to somebody than a permanent end to all of their distress? Is there anything better one can give? That's impossible. Right? So this association is very important and a great opportunity. We see an example of Prahlad Maharaj, right? How he became a devotee. He was born in a demoniac family. But we know, what was he doing in his prior life? He was serving devotees. He had association of Vaishnavas. He was honoring their remnants. He wasn't even going to any kind of formal training. He wasn't going through a great education. He was simply associated with great devotees. And then he got more association in the womb of his mother. Right? Prahlad Maharaj in the womb of his mother. Right? Kayadu was hearing from Narada Muni. So powerful was that association that he emerged as the great Mahajan Prahlad Maharaj and was able to withstand all the negative association surrounding him. So fixed was his devotional service. So this association, it is essential. It is critical. It's why in our steps to Krishna Prema, right, Sadhu Sangha comes immediately after we acquire some level of faith. Because that association is what will inspire us to then practice devotional service. And from the practice, we can then become free of our narthas, then become fixed, and then that taste will come. The real happiness. That bitterness will turn back into pure sweetness as our avidya is removed by this practice of devotional service. So this is the three kinds of happiness. I'll just conclude with one final comment. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives us kind of indirectly a very nice way for us to be continually happy in our spiritual life. Sometimes we experience, ups and downs in our practice of devotional service. And as I've mentioned previously, any downs we experience in our practice of devotional service is indication of some false ego in our devotional service. And so, the third verse of Shikshashtakam is like the perfect formula. If we can really try to maintain a humble person is always happy. A person who has no need for respect from anyone, but is giving respect to everybody, amanina manadena, they're always happy. Because their expectations are never unmet, because they have no expectations. Someone who is very tolerant, extremely tolerant. How tolerant? Like a tree. A tree is the most tolerant. If you kick a tree, it'll still give you a ripe mango. If you yell at a tree, it'll still allow you to cut its limb and use it to give you some firewood. So tolerant is a tree. But a tolerant person is always happy. So if we look to, our own sort of roller coaster in the amusement park, but our own ups and downs in our happiness and spiritual life, if we just kind of think back to this third verse and think how I can just imbibe a little bit more humility, a little bit more tolerance, a little bit more offering respects and expecting none. Because persons who exude these qualities, they're always happy. And there's no better example than Haridas Takur. Was he miserable while being beaten in the 22 marketplaces? What he was doing? Not only chanting, he was praying. Krishna sent Sudarshan Chakra to destroy them, but Chakra stopped. Why? Because Haridas Takur was praying, my Lord, please forgive them. They're just doing what their masters have told them. They don't understand what's happening. Please forgive them. And Chakra knew. Krishna had called his master. But whose words carry more weight than even Krishna's words? The words of his devotees. Krishna surrenders to the will of his devotees. Krishna tells us, Ma'amekam śṛṇu vraja. Surrender only to me. But Krishna surrenders to the will of his pure devotees. So Chakra didn't come. It stood, knowing, because Haridas Takur was begging for forgiveness. So what did Krishna do? Say, I tried, sorry. No, we know. He jumped onto the back of Haridas Takur and accepted all of those lashes. This is the sweet relationship that exists between Krishna and his pure devotees. That Haridas Takur was none the least bit disturbed, was not unhappy. When he was attempted to be defamed, did he protest afterwards after successfully defeating the prostitute? No, just simply went on his way, chanting, amanena, manadena. He had no respect for respect. But his association was so powerful, that it was because of him that Raghunath Das Goswami got deep, intimate association with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami writes this in Chaitanya Charitamrita, that because at an early age he had met Haridas Takur, that powerful association bestowed upon him the blessings to later in life spend such intimate time with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is the potency of association and the opportunity for us to find this happiness in the practice of our spiritual life. Okay? Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any questions, comments, discussion? Yes?
Prabhuji, I was just wondering, you commenced the discussion about happiness and how we're all desiring happiness, and it's a big, almost a selling point sometimes, for example, you chant around and you get some reward. Can you contextualize that in terms of, like Imran, you said, she wants the calamities, or the gopis of Vrindavan, they're going to give their dust, go to hell, Krishna's headaches relieved, we're happy. They're willing to accept what we might think is an unhappy situation. Could you talk about that progression and how that transforms from looking at ourselves and then goes to that situation, which is, from our perspective, geez, I don't want that.
It's a beautiful question. So, in the beginning of our spiritual life, and we're often inspired to that spiritual life with some personal motive, right? So to become free of birth, death, old age, and disease, to become free of adhyatmika, bhautika, devik, these difficulties. right? And so that is mixed bhakti. It's not pure bhakti yet, but it's progress. Right? Krishna tells us in the 7th chapter, one who comes to me in need of distress, in a need of wealth, inquisitive or wise, right? This arta, arta, jnani, jignasu, these 4 persons, they're also pious. Why? Because, Krishna says, because they've come to me, 2 things will happen. One, I will give them what's good for them. Not what they want, but what's good for them. Like a father. Child may ask for ice cream, ice cream, ice cream, but father will give based on what's good. The shopkeeper gives, it's a business transaction, right? If the ice cream is not good for a child, but they have the money, he'll give. That's like doing all of our karma kanda worship. But when we go to Krishna, Krishna being our loving father, he gives what's good for us. And the second thing that happens is he purifies us of that desire. What's the purification of that desire? The pure devotee knows that actually my happiness comes from Krishna's happiness. And then it comes to the point of love. When there is love, there is no self-motive. Right? A mother, does she want her happiness or happiness for her child? Is a mother willing to sacrifice her own happiness for her child's happiness? Why? Love. That's the mood of a devotee. A devotee is saying, I'm willing to sacrifice my own happiness because I have so much love for Krishna. And that bhakti, that pure selfless bhakti, is so pleasing to Krishna that he becomes overwhelmed. And he bestows so much happiness on that devotee. There's a beautiful narration of this in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, where Krishna Kaviraj Goswami is describing the internal reasons for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. And he talks about this transcendental happiness competition. Srimati Radharani is serving Krishna and she wants none of her own happiness. She's actually subduing her ecstatic symptoms because it's getting in the way of her service. She's saying, when my hands are shaking, I cannot serve him as well. When my eyes are tearing, the makeup is running and now Krishna has something less beautiful to look at. It's like mind-boggling how selfless she is. But because she's so selfless in that service, that Krishna becomes happy. And Radharani, seeing Krishna become happy, she becomes even happier. And Krishna is confounded. How somebody can be happier than me? I am the source of everything. Why? How my devotee can get more happiness than me? It's because of this completely selfless nature. It's pure love. It becomes so confounding to Krishna that what does he do? He comes to experience the happiness his devotee experiences. Right? But when that manifests, when one is completely pure in desire, anya bilashita shunyam, no desires, just desire to please Krishna. So, but again, that's a very elevated stage, right? So we may start in this mixed bhakti, coming to Krishna, understanding he's my supreme father, some desires, but slowly we want to purify for those desires and realize that serving Krishna in this unmotivated way, it is actually the ultimate experience. So that's how that happens. And Queen Kunti's prayer, she says calamity after calamity. Why? Because it deepens her absorption in Krishna. And 2, every time she experienced a calamity, Krishna showed up. Now, we are not so advanced to be able to pray like that. I don't recommend going to Krishna Balaram and say, give me calamity after calamity. But we can understand, okay, this is the mood of pure bhakti. And that's where we want to progress towards. Is that okay? Thank you. Yes?
So you said, actually Prabhupada said that one has to come to the mode of goodness to practice bhakti. You also said that mode of goodness is dangerous. So I'm trying to understand the two contradictory things.
Sure.
It's not actually contradictory, but
Sure.
you can elaborate.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good clarification. So the mode of goodness, again, is a material mode. Bhakti is purely spiritual. So they could not be any more diametrically different. It's light and dark. We should have that type of distinction, spirit and matter. But how to get to spirit? It comes through the mode of goodness. So mode of goodness is from the platform in which we can elevate to the mode of pure goodness or bhakti. So again, I gave the example of the aeroplane. Now the aeroplane cannot go from the gate to the sky. It must taxi and come to the runway. And from the runway, it can then ascend into the sky. So that runway is like the mode of goodness. You don't want to stay in the mode of goodness, but we want to come to the mode of goodness from the lower modes, and then from there, transcend. Right? That's why Krishna says, Mam chayo vivicārena bhakti yogena sevata sa gunan samititaitat. The gunas should transcend. How? By doing unfailing devotional service. Right? So devotional service is in the mode of pure goodness, shuddha sattva. Sattva gun is a material mode. So sometimes we mix, mode of goodness and bhakti, but mode of goodness is in the material platform, and shuddha sattva is in the pure goodness. Is that okay? So from there one can elevate to. Of course, people like Srila Prabhupada can take people from the mode of ignorance and take them to devotional service. That's the power of association. Narada Muni, right, with Valmiki, right, was a highway robber and murderer and became the Acharya of Ramayana. So the Acharya, the potent association, can uplift one from any mode. Is that okay?
Just a little follow-up.
Sure.
How do we differentiate here, as you said, we sometimes misinterpret the mode of goodness and bhakti. So practically, how do we differentiate?
Sure. So every day we have two choices, and only two. Either I'm going to serve Krishna's senses, or I'm going to serve my senses. We have to serve. This service nature is intrinsic to the soul. So either I'm going to serve my family, my society, my job, and if I have nobody else to serve, I'll serve my dog. That's what happens in America, and now happening in India. Either that I'm going to serve, or I'm going to serve Krishna. It is literally that black and white. If I'm serving Krishna, it's bhakti. If I'm serving myself, it's in the material modes. Right? So if I'm serving Krishna to serve myself, it's not pure bhakti. It's pious, because one can purify from there, but that is not a place to remain. One must progress through the blessings of Krishna. Right? Is that okay?
Yes.
So just think about that, right? Am I serving Krishna or serving myself?
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes. Thank you for the next questions. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.